What happens when one of Britain's most beloved comedic geniuses walks onto a daytime talk show and finds himself ambushed by a host who refuses to show even basic respect? In just 37 seconds, a simple question would turn into one of the most uncomfortable television moments ever broadcast, and what started as a friendly interview would explode into a full-blown on-air disaster that left the studio in absolute chaos. This is the story of how Rowan Atkinson, the man who gave us Mr. Bean and Blackadder, got kicked off Loose Women after a heated clash that no one saw coming. The morning started like any other episode of Loose Women. The studio lights were bright, the audience was ready, and the panel was in place. Denise Welch sat at the center of the desk, flanked by Nadia Sawalha on her left and Jane Moore on her right. Colleen Nolan sat at the far end, shuffling her notes and glancing at the cameras. The energy in the room felt electric, but not in a good way. There was tension even before Rowan walked out. When Rowan Atkinson was announced, the audience erupted in applause. He walked onto the stage with that signature gentle smile, waving politely to the crowd. He was there to talk about his latest project, a new comedy special that he had been working on for years. He sat down, adjusted his jacket, and waited for the interview to begin. Denise started off simple enough. "Rowan, welcome to the show. It's so lovely to have you here." Rowan nodded. "Thank you for having me. It's good to be here." But then, before he could even finish his sentence, Denise cut him off. "So tell me, do you ever get tired of playing the same characters over and over again? I mean, Mr. Bean is quite repetitive, isn't it?" The audience went quiet. Even the other panelists looked uncomfortable. Nadia shifted in her seat. Jane glanced down at her cards. Colleen's eyes widened slightly. Rowan paused, clearly taken aback by the bluntness of the question. "Well, I wouldn't say repetitive. Each project has its own unique challenges, and—" Denise interrupted again. "But surely you must feel like you're just doing the same thing, right? Like, how many times can you pull the same faces and expect people to laugh?" The tension in the room was palpable now. Rowan's smile faded just a bit. "I think that's a bit unfair. Comedy is about timing, about finding new ways to explore characters. And it's not just about pulling faces." Denise leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "I'm just saying what a lot of people think. Some might say your work is a bit one-note." Nadia jumped in quickly, trying to defuse the situation. "I think what Denise means is that your characters are so iconic that people associate you strongly with them. But Rowan, you've done so much more than just physical comedy, haven't you?" Rowan nodded, grateful for the lifeline. "Yes, exactly. I've worked in theater. I've done dramatic roles. I've written—" But Denise wasn't done. She leaned forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "But let's be honest, Rowan. When people see you, they think Mr. Bean. They don't think serious actor. They think silly man who doesn't talk much." The audience gasped. A few people murmured in disbelief. Jane Moore looked horrified. She opened her mouth to say something, but seemed unsure how to intervene. Rowan's expression shifted. The politeness was still there, but now there was steel underneath it. "With respect, Denise, I think you're confusing the character with the person. Mr. Bean is a character I created. He's not me. And the success of that character speaks to the craft involved, not a lack of it." Denise scoffed. "Oh, come on. Don't get all defensive. I'm just having a conversation." Colleen finally spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "I think Rowan has a point, Denise. We should be celebrating his work, not diminishing it." Denise shot Colleen a look that could freeze water. "I'm not diminishing anything. I'm asking questions. That's what we do here, isn't it?" Rowan took a breath, clearly trying to maintain his composure. "Asking questions is fine, but there's a difference between asking questions and being dismissive of someone's entire career." Denise laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was sharp, mocking. "Oh, so now I'm being dismissive. Because I don't bow down and worship at the altar of Mr. Bean." The studio was dead silent now. Even the crew members looked uncomfortable. Cameras kept rolling, capturing every painful second. Nadia tried again. Denise, maybe we should talk about Rowan's new project. That's why he's here, after all. But Denise ignored her completely. She kept her eyes locked on Rowan. You know what I think, Rowan? I think you've been coasting on the same act for decades. And now, you're here promoting another project that's probably just more of the same. Jane Moore's jaw dropped. Denise, that's completely out of line. Denise spun to face Jane. Excuse me? I can ask whatever questions I want. This is my interview. Jane shook her head. It's not just your interview. We're a panel, and you're being incredibly rude to our guest. Rowan sat there, watching the panel fracture in real time. He hadn't said anything yet, but you could see the frustration building in his eyes. Denise turned back to him. What's wrong, Rowan? Cat got your tongue? Or are you just waiting for someone to write your response for you? That was the moment everything changed. Rowan's face went from polite to ice cold. You know what, Denise? I came here today as a professional. I came here to talk about my work, to engage with your audience, to have a respectful conversation. But clearly, respect isn't something you're interested in. Denise rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go. The wounded artist routine. Rowan didn't raise his voice, but his words cut like a knife. It's not a routine. It's a fact. You've spent the last several minutes belittling my work, dismissing my career, and insulting me personally. And for what? For ratings? For drama? Because you think it makes you look clever? The audience started murmuring. Some people were nodding in agreement with Rowan. Others looked shocked that he was fighting back. Nadia leaned in. Rowan, I'm so sorry. This isn't how we normally... Rowan held up a hand gently. It's not your fault, Nadia. You and Jane and Colleen have been perfectly lovely. But this, he gestured toward Denise, this is unacceptable. Denise's face flushed red. Unacceptable? What, you're calling me unacceptable? Rowan looked her straight in the eye. I'm calling your behavior unacceptable. There's a difference. Although, given how you've conducted yourself today, maybe the line is blurrier than I thought. The audience actually gasped out loud at that. Colleen put her hand over her mouth. Jane looked like she was trying not to smile. Denise stood up from her chair, her voice rising. How dare you come onto my show and insult me? Rowan remained seated, calm as ever. Your show? Last I checked, it was called Loose Women, not the Denise Welch Hour, and I didn't insult you. I simply reflected back the energy you've been giving me since I sat down. Denise's hands were shaking now. She was so angry. You think you're so clever, don't you? With your posh accent and your fancy words? Rowan tilted his head. I think I'm a professional who expected to be treated with basic courtesy. Apparently that was too much to ask. Nadia tried to step in again. Let's all just take a breath and... Denise whirled on her. Stay out of this, Nadia. Jane stood up now, too. Denise, stop it. You're making a fool of yourself. Denise pointed a finger at Jane. You don't get to tell me what to do. Colleen spoke softly but firmly. Denise, listen to yourself. You're yelling at everyone. This has gotten completely out of hand. But Denise was too far gone. She turned back to Rowan, her voice venomous. You know what your problem is, Rowan? You can't handle a real conversation. You're so used to people laughing at your silly little characters that you fall apart when someone actually challenges you. Rowan stood up slowly, straightening his jacket. His voice was quiet, measured, and devastating. The only thing falling apart here is your credibility. I've been challenged by critics, by audiences, by colleagues far more intelligent and articulate than you could ever hope to be. And I've handled it with grace. But what you're doing isn't challenging me. It's bullying, and I don't tolerate bullies. The audience erupted in applause. People were actually standing up, clapping for Rowan. Denise looked around, furious and humiliated. She screamed over the applause. Get out! Get off my show! Rowan didn't flinch. With pleasure. But before he could move, a producer rushed onto the stage, whispering urgently to Denise. She shoved him away. I said get him out of here. Jane stood up and walked over to Rowan. I'm so sorry about this. You didn't deserve any of it. Rowan smiled at her kindly. Thank you, Jane. You've been nothing but professional. Nadia stood as well. Please don't judge all of us by this. We're not all like... She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone knew what she meant. Colleen nodded in agreement. You're a legend, Rowan. An absolute legend. And everyone watching knows it. Denise was practically vibrating with rage now. Are you all turning on me? After everything I've done for this show? Jane turned to her, eyes blazing. What you've done is embarrass yourself, and all of us. Rowan Atkinson is a guest. A respected, beloved guest. And you treated him like garbage. Denise's voice cracked. I was just trying to have an honest conversation. Rowan, who had started to walk toward the exit, stopped and turned back. An honest conversation requires honesty from both sides, Denise. What you were doing was performing. You were trying to create a moment, to be controversial, to get people talking. Well, congratulations. You succeeded, but not in the way you hoped. Denise took a step toward him. You don't know what you're talking about. Rowan's voice was ice. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been in this industry for over 40 years. I've seen people like you come and go. People who think that being rude is the same as being interesting. That tearing others down somehow builds them up. But it doesn't work that way. All it does is reveal who you really are. The entire studio was silent except for Rowan's voice. Every word landed like a hammer. Denise's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. Get out. Get out right now. Rowan nodded. I'm going. But before I do, I want to say something to your audience. He turned to face the crowd, his expression softening. To anyone watching at home, please know that creativity and art deserve respect. Whether you like someone's work or not, there's a human being behind it. Someone who poured their time, their energy, their soul into making something they hoped would bring joy or thought or feeling into the world. And that deserves to be met with basic human decency. The audience applauded again, louder this time. Some people were wiping tears from their eyes. Rowan turned back to the panel. Jane, Nadia, Colleen, it was a pleasure meeting you, even under these circumstances. He deliberately didn't look at Denise. Then he walked off the stage, his head held high, his dignity intact. The moment he disappeared through the exit, chaos erupted on set. Denise collapsed back into her chair, her face in her hands. Jane and Nadia were talking in hushed, urgent tones. Colleen sat frozen, looking shell-shocked. Producers were running around, trying to figure out what to do next. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds before someone finally yelled to cut. But it was too late. The damage was done. The entire incident had been broadcast live to millions of viewers. In the immediate aftermath, the panel sat in stunned silence. Denise refused to look at anyone. Jane finally broke the silence. I can't believe that just happened. Nadia shook her head. I've never been so embarrassed in my life. That poor man. Colleen spoke quietly. He handled it better than most people would have. He was calm. He was articulate. He was right. Denise's head snapped up. Right? He was arrogant and condescending. Jane's voice was sharp. He was defending himself. You attacked him from the moment he sat down. Denise stood up again, grabbing her microphone and throwing it onto the desk. I'm done with this. I'm going to my dressing room. As she stormed off, Nadia called after her. Denise, we need to finish the show. But Denise didn't stop. She disappeared backstage, leaving the other three panelists sitting there, trying to process what had just happened. A producer came over, looking pale and stressed. We need to go to commercial. Now. Jane nodded numbly. The cameras cut, and the live broadcast switched to ads. But in living rooms across the country, people were already talking. Social media was exploding. Clips of the confrontation were being shared and reshared, and the consensus was overwhelming. Rowan Atkinson had been ambushed. He had been disrespected, and he had handled it with a grace and dignity that made his antagonist look even worse by comparison. Back on set, the remaining panelists tried to regroup. When they came back from commercial, Jane addressed the camera directly. "We want to apologize to our viewers and to Rowan Atkinson for what just occurred. That was not representative of who we are or what this show stands for." Nadia nodded. "Rowan is a brilliant artist and a lovely person. He deserved so much better than what happened here today." Colleen added quietly, "We hope he knows that not all of us feel the way. That some of us have nothing but respect for him and his work." They tried to continue with the rest of the show, but the energy was gone. The audience sat in uncomfortable silence. The remaining segments felt hollow and forced. Everyone was still thinking about what had happened, about the way Rowan had walked off that stage with his head held high, while his attacker crumbled under the weight of her own actions. In her dressing room, Denise sat alone, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Part of her knew she had gone too far. Part of her knew that she had let her need for drama override her basic sense of decency. But her pride wouldn't let her admit it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Meanwhile, Rowan Atkinson was in a car heading away from the studio. He sat quietly, looking out the window at the London streets passing by. His phone was buzzing non-stop with messages of support, but he didn't check them. He didn't need to. He knew he had done the right thing. He had stood up for himself. He had refused to be diminished. And in doing so, he had reminded everyone watching what true class and dignity looked like. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "That was quite something back there, sir." Rowan smiled slightly. "Yes, it was." The driver hesitated, then continued. "For what it's worth, I thought you handled it brilliantly. My wife and I watch you all the time. You're a legend." Rowan's smile widened just a bit. "Thank you. That means a great deal." As the car drove on, Rowan reflected on what had transpired. He had walked into that studio expecting a normal interview, a chance to talk about his work, to connect with an audience, and to share a few laughs. Instead, he had been met with hostility and disrespect from someone who seemed to think that being provocative was the same as being interesting. But he had also witnessed something else. He had seen the other panelists stand up for him. He had seen the audience rally behind him. He had felt the overwhelming support of people who understood that what had happened was wrong, and that, in the end, was what mattered. Not the confrontation itself, but the response to it. The way people chose kindness over cruelty. The way they chose respect over ratings. Back at the studio, the show finally ended. The audience filed out, still buzzing with conversation. The crew began breaking down the set, their faces grim. Everyone knew this would be talked about for days, maybe weeks. Jane, Nadia, and Colleen gathered their things in silence. Finally, Jane spoke. "We need to talk about what just happened." Nadia nodded. "We can't just pretend this didn't occur. We need to address it properly." Colleen agreed. Rowan deserves a proper apology, a public one. The three of them looked toward Denise's dressing room. The door was still closed. No one had seen her come out. Jane sighed. "I'll try talking to her." She walked over and knocked gently. "Denise, can we talk?" There was no response. Jane knocked again. "Denise, please. We need to figure this out." Finally, Denise's voice came through the door, muffled and cold. "There's nothing to figure out. I did what I thought was right. If people can't handle that, that's their problem." Jane closed her eyes, frustrated and sad. "It's not about people handling it, Denise. It's about basic respect. You crossed a line today." Denise yanked the door open, her face red and blotchy. "I crossed a line? He's the one who insulted me on live television." Jane's voice was firm, but kind. "He defended himself after you spent 10 minutes attacking him. There's a difference." Denise's lip trembled. "I wasn't attacking him. I was asking tough questions." Nadia had walked over now, too. "Denise, tough questions are one thing, but what you were doing wasn't journalism. It was cruelty." Denise looked between the two of them, her anger giving way to something that looked almost like desperation. "You're supposed to be on my side." Colleen joined them, her voice gentle. "We are on your side, Denise. That's why we're telling you this. Because we care about you. But you were wrong today, and you need to acknowledge that." Denise's face crumpled. For a moment, it looked like she might actually break down, might actually admit what everyone already knew. But then she straightened up, wiped her eyes roughly, and shook her head. "No, I don't need to acknowledge anything. If Rowan Atkinson can't handle a little heat, that's his problem, not mine." She grabbed her bag and pushed past them, heading for the exit. The 3 remaining panelists watched her go, a mix of pity and frustration on their faces. Jane whispered, "She's going to regret this." Nadia nodded. "She already does. She's just too stubborn to admit it." Across town, Rowan arrived at his home. He thanked the driver, went inside, and finally allowed himself to exhale. The confrontation had been exhausting, not because of the words exchanged, but because of the sheer audacity of it all. The presumption that someone could treat another human being that way, simply because they had a microphone and a camera. He poured himself a cup of tea and sat down in his favorite chair. His phone was still buzzing. Messages from friends, from colleagues, from people he hadn't spoken to in years. All of them expressing support, expressing outrage on his behalf. He read through a few of them and found himself smiling. One message in particular stood out. It was from a young comedian he had mentored years ago. "You showed everyone today what real strength looks like. Not shouting, not aggression, but calm, articulate dignity. Thank you for that lesson." Rowan typed back a simple response. "Thank you. Stay kind. Stay honest. And the rest takes care of itself." He set the phone down and stared out the window at his garden. The afternoon light was golden and soft. Birds chirped in the trees. Everything was peaceful. And in that moment, Rowan realized something important. The confrontation didn't define him. It didn't change who he was or what he had accomplished. It was simply a moment, a blip, an unfortunate incident that would fade with time. What mattered was how he had responded. With truth, with clarity, with the same intelligence and dignity that had guided him throughout his entire career. He had walked onto that stage as Rowan Atkinson, beloved comedian and respected artist. And he had walked off the same way. Nothing Denise Welch said or did could take that away from him. Meanwhile, back at the studio, the reality of what had happened was beginning to sink in. Producers were in emergency meetings. Network executives were fielding calls. Social media was a firestorm of opinions, and nearly all of them sided with Rowan. The phrase Team Rowan was trending. Clips of his calm, devastating responses to Denise's attacks were being viewed millions of times. People were creating memes, writing think pieces, dissecting every word of the exchange. And in the center of it all was Denise Welch, whose attempt to create a memorable television moment had backfired spectacularly. Instead of looking like a tough interviewer, she looked like a bully. Instead of seeming clever, she seemed cruel. Instead of elevating herself, she had diminished herself in front of millions. The other panelists released a joint statement later that evening, and it was carefully worded but clear in its message. "We want to extend our deepest apologies to Rowan Atkinson for the treatment he received on today's show. His contributions to comedy and entertainment are immeasurable, and he deserved far better than what occurred. We hope to have the opportunity to welcome him back in the future under very different circumstances. The statement conspicuously did not mention Denise by name, but everyone reading it knew exactly what it meant. It was a public distancing, a way of saying, this was not us. This was one person. As the sun set on what would go down as one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history, two very different people sat in two very different states of mind. Rowan Atkinson, secure in who he was and what he stood for, be comfortable in the knowledge that he had handled an ugly situation with grace. And Denise Welch, alone with her thoughts, wrestling with the reality that her actions had consequences she hadn't anticipated. The interview that was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance had turned into something much bigger. A moment that captured something fundamental about respect, about dignity, about the way we treat each other when the cameras are rolling and the whole world is watching. And in the end, it proved something that Rowan Atkinson had always known. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to be cruel to be compelling. You just need to be honest, to be yourself, and to never let anyone make you feel small. Because true greatness, true class, cannot be diminished by small-minded attacks. It can only shine brighter in contrast to the darkness around it. And on that day, in that studio, in front of that audience, Rowan Atkinson shone very bright indeed,